This episode is brought to you by RAYCON. You never know where life is going to take you, but RAYCON's everyday earbuds offer premium audio that goes wherever you go. And their latest model is better than ever with a 32-hour battery life, active noise cancellation, and multi-point connectivity to pair with 2 devices at once. RAYCONs bring you top-tier audio quality at just half the price of other premium brands. And they even offer a 30-day happiness guarantee. No questions asked. Get 15% off RAYCON products site-wide at buyraycon.com/command.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
And today we are opening the mailbox.
We're opening the year by opening the mailbox?
Yeah, there's a lot of Christmas cards still left in there, and when we left it, it's overflowing at this point.
Hopefully this one not so much junk mail as my real mailbox.
Yeah, God.
This time of year, yeah. It's
we're going to read all of the coupons in this episode. To kick off the new year, we are answering a bunch of questions that we got from patrons, and we're going to talk about all sorts of things that aren't necessarily big enough for a full episode, but are still worth talking about. So we're going to talk about everything from what commanders we refuse to play against to what to do that the format is speeding up as much as it is to even what is the most powerful commander color in Commander.
Yeah, the most powerful color in Commander is a pretty provocative question. I'm not even sure we agree about that, so that might be a little bit of a debate.
I'm not even sure I know that.
I feel pretty confident in
guess.
mine, but so some fun things to talk about, fun to answer some questions from the listeners. We also pulled comments and things we've been asked over the years, so a good chance to sort of address a bunch of bite-sized questions. Before we get into it, of course, we want to talk about our sponsors, cardkingdom.com/command. That's the best place to go to get your Magic products, singles, anything at all. You might have some holiday money sitting in your pocket or your bank account or whatever. A great place to use that is cardkingdom.com/command because they have all of the Magic products, singles, everything you're looking for. If you're building a new deck, or even we got Ether Drift around the corner. If you want to wait a little bit, I'm sure it'll be on pre-order pretty soon.
Drifting around the corner.
Did that totally on purpose. Card Kingdom, we love them because they have huge inventory. If there is ever any sort of mistake, they make good on it very, very quickly, and they are one place that gets you all of your cards in one convenient package. So if you want to use the best card retailer in the biz, cardkingdom.com/command is the place to go.
And if you have the best cards in your hand, you're going to need the best things to protect them. Go to ultrapro.com/command for the highest quality Magic accessories in the business. Maybe this year you resolve to take better care of your cards, to get better sleeves.
That's a good
Maybe
idea.
you resolve to organize your collection.
Not me.
ULTRAPRO has all of the tools that you need to get started. They've got great boxes and sleeves and binders, so you can actually finally go through that bulk, get the cards that you need to protect, put them in binders, put them in sleeves, make sure that they are safe, or just dress up one of your brand new decks. It's the holidays, maybe you treated yourself. ULTRAPRO has some amazing products, including the Mana 8 line is very cool. Mana 8 is gorgeous and clean. It's white with a giant color symbol in the middle of it. So
one of the Mana
if
logos.
you're confident what the most powerful color in Commander is, you can get it on a playmat. Mana 8's really sweet. Or if you're going to Chicago, get it signed. It's perfect for that as well. Again, go to ultrapro.com/command. You'll support the show while you're shopping.
Yeah, and the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/command zone. There's all kinds of cool perks for our patrons. They can chat with us on our Discord. We have exclusive content that only patrons have access to. You get early access to game nights and extra turns, ad-free, so you get to watch them before anybody else.
We answer questions.
We answer questions. We ask them what topics we should discuss. We poll them often, and then we'll often cite that in the podcast. So if you want to participate in our community, support our content, hey, it's the start of the year. It'd be a good time to join up and help us out for this year. It'd be great. Again, that's patreon.com/command zone. And another perk is we call out one lucky patron every single episode.
And this episode is dedicated to Gage Manapat. Gage, you rock.
All right, let's get into this Q&A, this mailbox. What question do we want to start with here, Rachel?
So the first one I picked out was a question from Finn on Patreon.
Okay.
They said, what's your process for choosing a commander to build around? As someone who struggles to identify what mechanics and archetypes I enjoy most, it's difficult to choose a commander or a theme to build. This is an interesting question. I feel like it's a little different for everybody because everybody wants something a little different out of a commander.
Yeah, and I think for us, there's also sort of two parts to it, which is, I don't know about you, but I do it a little bit differently when it's for content, for game nights or something, than just for my personal deck that I'm building. And of course, almost always, because we film a lot of gameplay, I will end up playing my personal deck. I don't think there's a single one I own anymore that I haven't played on content.
Yeah.
But like if I'm building for a Game Nights episode specifically, I might choose based on different criteria sometimes just to change it up, right? Like, I haven't played Rakdos in a while. I play blue every time, so once in a while I want to break away or, And I think I do that for myself too. But for me, there's not like any real set process. It's mostly about like what gets me excited, what like makes the hair on the back of your neck tingle a little bit. And that usually has to do with sort of two things. One is, when I look at a commander, do I immediately sort of think of a couple cool interactions that get me excited? Like you read it and you 2 or 3 cards or often like categories of cards like pop to mind. And if there's things that people do all the time or I've done a lot, it's less exciting. But if it's not, if it's something like, I could use this card and this card and this card, and those are not cards that I necessarily have in other decks all the time, then that tends to be, that'd be cool. I'd like to play with that card, and this would make it really good.
Yeah, if it gives you a reason to pull a really cool card out of your binder that you're like, I've been looking for a place to play Teferi's Veil. I'm like, I'm building this just so I can put Teferi's Veil in a deck,
Yeah, I have a whole list of cards like that on my phone that are just like, I want to find a place for these because I think this card's cool, but I need, it needs to have certain synergies and you need to have certain reasons to do it. Yeah.
I was talking to a friend who had a binder of cards that he just wants to put in decks.
Yeah.
It's like either signed ones or cool versions that he has or just cool cards that he's wanted a place for. I was like, that's so smart. Then you can like pull a bunch of cards and start building a deck out of these cards that make you excited.
So that would be good advice for Finn right there is maybe just like as you're going through cards in general, building decks or whatever, pull aside the ones that just seem cool to you, but you're not sure what the home is for them because they might inspire you when you see a legendary creature from a new set or whatever. You might think like, that'll go with one of the cards I want to play, and that might sort of get you excited and get you going. The other thing that I tend to find is sometimes there's commanders where no card comes to mind when I see it. They're kind of head scratchers, and I'm like, that's weird. I don't know exactly what I'd do with that. And that will often, to me, be like, I want to dive deeper on that. First of all, it's kind of our job to talk about cards around here, but also, having been around Magic for so long, it's not that often that something comes up where you're like, wow, I don't know what I would do. And that is kind of tickles your brain in a way that you're like, I'm going to get on Scryfall and like figure out what would I do. And then you often find things where you're like, it would work really good with this or that. And then that starts to get you excited because you're like, this is not the type of thing where it's easy to build, at least for me. It didn't come to mind right away. And that's kind of fun as well. So those are kind of the two paths for myself. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I love a commander that asks questions that you look at and you're like, okay, I can think of like 3 cards, but I have no idea what the rest of that deck looks like, and it's gonna take me a second to figure it out. The reason that I built Mirko recently, which is the reanimate stuff if its power is less than his power, I was like, what does a reanimator deck look like if you focus on stuff with 0 power? And then I was like, you could do the modular thing, or you could put in the surveil side, and then figuring out that balance on where the deck actually wants to be. Is part of the challenge and is what is still exciting about building decks. And I think that's definitely the thing that draws me the most to a commander is one that I'm like, I don't know exactly where that wants to be. Yeah. Because there's some commanders that I find inherently boring and I'm less interested in building because I just know what the 99 looks like. I can like you look at the commander and you're like, okay, so it's probably like 25 L's and like a few things that are pump effects. And that's really fun to play, but it's not as interesting to build. These days I've been a lot less formal with my deck building. I used to spend a ton of time building digitally. And lately, once I find a commander that I'm interested in, I've just been going through my box and like pulling cards out and just trying to build a rough shot 99 with what I have. I've got a lot of cards.
Yeah.
And I find that it makes me play more interesting cards and less of the same cards.
Right.
And once you get to play with it, even if it's not the perfect 99, you get a better idea for what the commander actually wants. You're like, okay, 3 mana rocks feel really awkward because of this, or like I thought that if I had a bigger pump effect, that it would be worth it to spend more mana, but I really just need the cheaper versions of that. So you learn stuff when you're playing, and I think when it's not for content, it's more fun to just play and learn from the commander rather than build the perfect 99, play it, and just assume that that is exactly what the deck wants.
I mean, a good thing about that way too is that you can find out if you like it.
Yeah.
Without having wasted as much time and resources,
right.
Before. It's like try it before you buy it kind of deal. And then you're like, oh, this is fun, but now I do actually want to optimize it a little or whatever.
Yeah.
And you feel better knowing that like, I'm not just starting from zero, build it, spending a bunch of time and money and then playing it for the first time and finding out, because this definitely happens.
Yeah.
I'm not having that much fun when I play it. And why did I buy all this stuff and waste all this time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's fun. I think it's important to say that like the value judgments we place on stuff doesn't have to be your value judgments. If you like 25 elves and whatever, that doesn't matter. Like just because it's not novel to us doesn't mean it's not novel to you. And everyone should just play what excites them. And I think that's the biggest part. Is just like when you see something and it makes you excited to do whatever it is that you're planning to do. You don't need any other reason beyond that to build the deck. I think there are other reasons you can give yourself that feel like things you're quote unquote supposed to do, like not the same thing every time. But if you like doing the same thing every time, do the same thing every time.
Why do other things? It's your hobby.
Yeah, it's like I go to a restaurant and my girlfriend, if she finds a thing she likes at a restaurant, she'll order it basically every time we go to that restaurant. And I'm the type of person who's like, I'll try a couple other things on the menu just for variety and to see what it does. She's not wrong and I'm not right. This is not, she's right for her and I'm right for me. And it's fine with building Magic decks too.
Yeah. I think the like 32 deck challenge is a trap for Commander players because we're completionists where it's like, I have to have one deck in every single color pairing.
Yeah, no, you don't.
And so you don't.
Yeah. If you want to do it, it's totally fine and
that's
that can
great.
be fun. But
if you like playing Jeskai, you can build 4 Jeskai decks and that's okay. You don't have to take apart a beloved Jeskai deck because there's a new one that you're excited about.
But I will say sometimes pushing yourself outside your comfort zone does cause you to realize that you actually like things you thought you didn't. And that happened to me earlier on. It happens to me less now because I've played everything, but every color or whatever. But early on, I remember being like, I should play some Boros, I should play some Rakdos, I should play some of these colors that are more aggressively bent and not normal. And I found like, oh, I really like that deck a lot. And maybe this play style is not so antithetical to me as I thought. So you can also reveal things about yourself by just once in a while forcing yourself to try a different dish on the menu. But but it's totally fine if you try that dish and you're like, nope, I know what I like and I just want to order that. That's totally fine.
You could also try borrowing decks if you're in a playgroup and there's a deck that you like. Ask if you can play it and see what you like about it. Because somebody else's deck building style is going to be completely different from yours, and it's a really fun experience to try something that you didn't exactly assemble. So
yeah, that's great advice. All right, the next question is from Lilix, also on Patreon. It says, what are your thoughts on Rule 0 commanders? And are there any you would consider using? And just so everyone knows, a Rule 0 commander is generally a commander that wouldn't otherwise be legal in the format. So somebody says, I built this deck around this Planeswalker. Is it okay if I play that deck in this pod?
Yeah, there's like silver bordered commanders would qualify here, or some people are like, oh, I'll Rule 0 these 2 partners together because for lore reasons or flavor reasons, perhaps.
Right.
And I love this question because I love Rule 0 decks and I love Rule 0 commanders. I have multiple unknown commander decks, which are like playtest cards designed by Gavin. They are not strictly legal. They're not even Magic cards, but I built entire decks around them and they're really fun. But when I bring them out, I have to be very careful about, is this the right moment for it? Like, am I among friends or somebody who is interested in seeing this? And I think when you're building it, you have to make sure that you're not building one that's too good. Like, I think there is a very real power ceiling on when you build Rule 0 cards. Like, if you're Rule 0, if you're breaking a rule, you need to have a reason that isn't just, it's busted and I want to do it. Otherwise, there's no reason for anybody to like permit that. Like, if you're playing as powerful as you can go, you got to play by the rules. Yeah. So I think if you're doing something silly and you want to like do stuff for flavor reasons, I'm psyched to see what you can do with Rule 0 commanders. I've got like a 5-color My Little Pony deck that has multiple silver bordered cards. And obviously that has a very real power ceiling on it. But if somebody sits down and they were like, oh, this is my Urza Mishra deck, and they're Rule 0'd because they're brothers, you're like,
Yeah, Urza's already good. You're fine.
I have questions.
Yeah.
And most of the time, I'm going to be less comfortable playing against a commander that's that I know is super busted, and you just added colors to it because you think that would be cooler.
Yeah, I'm fine with Rule Zero commanders. I don't tend to build them myself, but I tend to be okay when people play them. And I've seen ones that are very cool, and that's fun. And I've seen the other ones where you're like, that's just really powerful.
Yeah.
I'm more wary when they're non-creatures. So if somebody has a planeswalker or some, God forbid, an enchantment or something that they want to play as their commander, I'm not saying I will outright say no all the time, but I'm more wary because the commander mechanic is already broken inherently. And the only thing that keeps it even a little bit in check is that every color is built with ways to deal with creatures. But other permanent types, that's not the same. There are certain, like black just can't really deal, outside of a couple of cards, with enchantments. So if somebody is like, hey, I got an enchantment in my command zone, it's like, I don't know, it changes the power structure like quite a bit. Again, could be fine, and I may or may not say no, but I'm more wary in those cases. I don't know that I have a Rule Zero commander right now. I've built a couple for content, but I don't know that in my regular arsenal of decks, I don't think I have a single one. So I don't tend to be drawn towards building them. But again, I'm mostly fine if people do.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you said, because there's this inherent thing. If you build a Rule Zero commander and then mop the floor with the table, it feels bad for the table because they're like, yeah,
we let you do this thing.
Of course you mop the floor with us because, you're breaking the rules. So your deck should be not very powerful, like you said, I think in most cases. And I also like what you said. I think you need to know where you normally play. If it's friends and a play group that you play with all the time, Rule Zero is going to be great. If you often play at like an LGS or a place where like there's a lot of strangers involved, it's going to be a less good idea to try and play Rule Zero commanders. That's just kind of inherently because
it's a big
friends will
ask.
and your friends will be forgiving. You played 20 games with them or whatever, and it's going to be like, I built this. I thought it was fun, and afterwards they might still grumble if you mop the floor with them. But it's like, hey, you tried a thing. It's not that big a deal. You play with these people all the time. They can get you back by doing it themselves at some point along the way. But with strangers, it's more. It's like that might be their only interaction with you, and you don't want them to be like it's heavily weighted towards you're a jerk, kind of. Yeah.
It's I would say the one that I have the biggest problem with, I don't care about silver bordered cards or unknown cards for the most part. There's some that I'm like, okay, all right. But is when people Rule Zero partners, I think is...
And partners already really
partners
broken.
Is really, really powerful. And they're like, it's lore reasons. And it's like, it's color reasons.
Is it a lore deck?
Yeah. Like
is everything in your deck then like only exist in that world? Like, then maybe. But if it's lore reasons, but then I'm just playing Ristic Study and stuff, no.
Yeah. Then it feels a little less okay to me.
This actually dovetails into the next question, which was from Zephyr W on Patreon. So it's kind of related. It says, you probably do your best not to turn away fans, but what is one commander, if any, that you would politely decline to play against in a pod? So this dovetails for me because I'm going to tell a little story. And then I think we can answer this question for real because I don't think this person's asking about Rule Zero commanders.
Right.
But we've been saying, I wouldn't necessarily play against this. So I'm not going to say who, but there was a person who, came to play on one of our gameplay shows, and they wanted to play a Rule Zero commander. They had built a deck around the Ozolith. And I was like, okay. Okay. I think we'll allow the Ozolith. Like that's powerful, but I was like, it's powerful. I think I said this to them. But the fact that you're restrained by colorless feels like it would be enough to keep that in check and be interesting. And they're like, oh no, the color identity is I think Abzan or something. And I was like, oh,
it's blue black. Yeah.
Oh, blue black. Okay, you know the person.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. Then no, you can't just also break the rule of color identity. I'll give you one rule break, but two. Like, I just get to choose what colors go in. My Ozolith is the commander, which is like a very powerful card, non-creature to put in the command zone. And I was like, no, we can't do it. You got to play a regular deck. Sorry.
And it's a sick deck, but it's also like, it's very powerful.
Yeah, of course. Well, you can Rule Zero one rule, but not two. I'm not, We're not also breaking color identity. Anyway, I don't think this question is about Rule Zero commanders. I think this question is about, are there any legal commanders that you would not play against, Rachel?
I will say I will mostly try any deck once. I've played against Turgid. I've played against a lot of decks that I'm like, all right, we'll see. And mostly I'll adjust in like how I choose my deck and how I play against this deck to react to that. But once I've played against a deck and I get a read on what the deck is trying to do, if it's not an experience that I'm interested in repeating, then I will say like, okay, let's switch decks or perhaps switch pods. We've given it a shot. So for the most part, I'm wary of stuff like Turgid, and I'm wary of stuff like super combo-y decks. Urza is a big red flag, and I'll give you a shot, but most of the time I will do my adjustments in Rule Zero, or in the pregame conversation anyway.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any legal commander I would say, no, I'm not playing against that. I would just adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's Turgid, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a Derevi Stacks deck that I keep for these occasions, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. And I have a CDH deck on me for the same reasons. Oh, you want to play CDH? Sure. I don't normally play my Teferi deck. It's not the best.
I'll do my best, yeah.
And sometimes if I don't have that deck on me, I'll just be like, cool, I'll play the most powerful deck I've got. You're probably going to win, but let's play. That's fine.
Yeah.
And I never really have found that that's not fun. Like I know going in, I'm vastly disadvantaged. I probably get smashed. And that's when I get smashed, it's like, yep, that was going to happen. I did my best with the deck I had with me. And every once in a while, the deck's doing pretty good. It's actually kind of in it. And maybe I actually win 1 out of 20 games, But it's like, yeah. So it's all about expectation. So yeah, for me, I don't think there's any deck I would straight up turn away. But like you said, I think that doesn't mean I would want to play against that deck over and over again.
Yeah.
So like Turgid is an experience that like I would sign up for and be okay with, once a session, but I don't want like, hey, Thursday night, I'm going to spend the whole Thursday night playing against Turgid. That doesn't sound like a fun Thursday night to me. So yeah.
And it's like, once you played against it, you're like, well, I've given it a shot, and it is what I thought it was. And today I'm not interested in playing that kind of game.
Maybe next session, one of the 4 games can be that again, but let's not do that again tonight.
Or I just don't have a deck that can fight on that level sometimes is the answer too. Like I don't bring all 25 decks to the game store when I go. So it's like I have 3. None of them are going to be on the right battlefront as that one. So we're play a different deck, or we're going to have to find another opponent.
Yeah, that's true. I want to play every game as my like no CEDH deck against the CEDH pods. I'll play one of those, and then it's like if that's all you got, we probably should break up and find other opponents.
Yeah. So it's like I don't think there's any like inherently bad commanders. I don't think there's any inherently bad Magic cards. So it's I will do.
It's all about expectation.
Yes, for sure. Just don't lie to me.
Exactly.
Then we're gonna have a problem. The next question that we pulled up is from Nerd on Patreon. It says, when building a new deck for Commander, how do you decide what's acceptable for the power level you're aiming for? For example, when aiming for high level play, what is the cutoff point for strong but not broken that you build by? This is a very complicated question.
Yeah, we did a whole episode talking about this. Actually, we've done multiple over the years, but the most recent, which I think it was you and I, and we did a pretty good job. I think it's called Cards That Change Your Deck's Power Level, and it is episode 584, which is about a year ago, I think now.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But I think most things haven't changed. We talk in some specific cards that we think change deck's power level and philosophy.
Some of those are banned.
Some of those are now banned, yep. So when they say cutoff point of strong but not broken, I would put that where I consider the like line between 8s and 9s. So like as strong as you can get before you're like legitimately a low tier CEDH deck, which to me that line is mostly about tutoring and combos. So if I was trying to build the strongest deck I could, but it's not CEDH level, then it would probably not have a lot of tutors and not have a lot of combos. Could have some tutors, but if you're tutoring for a combo win as fast as you can, that falls into CEDH for me. And then we talked about this at length in that episode, there's a variety of cards that I would use to sort of, maintain power level, like Jessica's Wills and Teferi's Protections and Smothering Tithes, 0 mana rocks and things like that, that I would use Ancient Tombs and Grim Monoliths and Mana Vaults and things to tune, how high I want to go versus how low I want to go on the power level. And there's certain ones where you're like, you can't go that low, but you can keep it from being low tier CEDH or just below if you want by just saying like, okay, I'm not going to allow Cyclonic Rift and a couple of the 0 mana counter spells or something.
Yeah. I think that we talk a lot in this episode about cards that sort of push it even to like 8s. The difference between 7 and 8, I think, is a really big line that people are worried about in casual is like, okay, what's good at the average table? What's a 7?
Yeah.
And what gets a little bit pushed past that.
Yeah.
And I think it's the inclusion of efficient cards and staples. So free interaction, free protection, even highly powerful like ramp spells or interaction spells are the things that sort of shift a deck up. And it's not like 1 or 2. It's like if you have 5 or if you have 6 of these like very powerful stapley type cards that are going to push your deck toward the broken side of things. For me, a way that I limit it is I try and keep most of my deck to be synergy based. Even the removal is like, if it's a creature deck, I have my removals on creatures because I'm a blink deck. So I'm not going to lean on some of the most efficient interaction or whatever. I will try and have the whole deck mechanically work really well together. My aura deck uses auras, so it's limited by speed, that kind of thing. So I think the more that a way that I restrain power level is just to avoid the cards that are strictly better and try and include ones that are more on theme or are more on the plan of the deck. And then when things get more powerful is when you start sacrificing like theme or like archetype for raw power. So the tutors and fast mana and just staples like Jessica's Will and Teferi's Protection, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I tend to limit tutors a lot.
I don't play basically any of them right now.
Yeah, I play very few tutors. Every once in a while I'll play one or two, especially if there's like, there's one key card. It's not a combo piece, but it's like, the deck kind of works when it's out and I'd like to get it. So I'll put in a Steel Shaper's Gift to get this Skull Clamp.
Yeah,
and
they're
it's
usually
just like,
restricted to like equipment tutors or enchantment tutors, that kind of thing.
But I still play very few. And I think that's a really good way for people, if you're trying to lower power level of your decks to sort of meet your pot or your playgroup or whatever, if you just look and take out all tutors, that has a pretty big effect. It's not like going to take it from a 9 to a 6 or something, but it's a good way to sort of keep it in that line.
It also makes it more interesting to play for me. Like when you cut down some of the consistency, remove some of the tutors, you don't have the same card every single game to do the same thing.
But again, you like to order something different off the menu.
That's
and some
true.
people don't. And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
And just putting a value judgment on like it is strictly better. It's like, listen, if you like to get the same card every game and play it, I'm not saying you're wrong, but that is a powerful thing to be doing inherently because you can plan on doing it. And so being able to do it less inherently makes you less powerful. And what you're trying to do is kind of stick to this line. You're looking for things that allow you the ability to move where your deck is along that line. And tutors is one of the easiest ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And also sort of the least annoying, because if you could do that by like messing up your mana base. But the way you're doing it is adding a ton of variance where my deck just doesn't do anything but you could make your decks less powerful by doing that, but I don't recommend it.
Throw in all basics.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, just cutting out fast mana, cutting out tutors is the first place to start.
But I also, powerful staples I think are another, like the Jessica's Wills and stuff that we talked about in that episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of really sweet magic cards. You can play something different in that spot if you want to pull your power level deck back.
All right, next question is from Brody H on Patreon. Brody says, I have a 4-player playgroup, but am by far the most invested in the game. They buy decks from time to time, but we mostly do budget challenges. When I'm building a deck, how do I make more fun decks, fun in quotes, ones that don't take over the game and just generally support a pretty chill playstyle so I don't command the table? This is a variation on a question that I'd say every time we do a mailbag episode, we get some version of this. We don't always answer it. We haven't done a mailbag in a while.
Yeah.
It's this, I'm winning too many games in my playgroup. Sometimes it manifests in the form of my playgroups killing me first every time, and that means you won too many games for a while. So good on you, Brody, for knowing this is kind of an issue, and it seems like you're tackling it before it becomes a real problem. Also good on you. That's somebody who's socially aware, and I think that's a good thing to be in Commander. So how would you suggest that Brody go about addressing this?
This is a really tough challenge. I mean, it's honestly one that I've struggled with at various points in my career to today. Magic playing outside of work.
I would say that it's pretty safe to call it a career at this point, Rachel.
Yeah, we'll take it. My Commander playing career sounds so similar. It just sounds so silly. I mean,
I don't think anyone out there is questioning that it's a career.
I don't know. They feel separate. It's tricky. It's really hard. I mean, if everybody's playing budget decks and everybody's playing precons and you have this play group that is where they're at, you kind of have to meet them where they're at. Like, I think you have to play budget restricted decks or you have to play precons and you have to try and find ones that feel fun for you to play with this play group. And I get it. Like, I have a lot of decks that I really love that I don't get to play with my play group most of the time because it's not appropriate for that play group. It's my Rakdos Lord of Rides deck is super sweet, but it is a combo deck. It plays tutors and is trying to kill you with a giant walking ballista. And that's not the kind of Magic that we play in my play group. So I bring it to game stores and I'll bring it to conventions sometimes and try and find a more appropriate pod for it. But what I would recommend is trying to find another outlet for playing those decks that you're excited about and trying to play those at a table that are excited about those decks. And then taking the restrictions that everybody else is playing within and get excited by those. Like, recognize that budget is a really cool restriction and you can build some really sweet stuff inside the realm of budget and get excited by that restriction. And if that doesn't excite you, then buying a precon off the shelf is a great way just to play with your buddies.
I think, though, in Brody's case, it's even possible that within these budget challenges, that because he's more invested in the game, he's still going
can
to
just build
dominate.
a better deck,
because just putting one more time, which is an investment that will pay off, because not only will it help you with that deck, but every deck you build, you put in more time to all those decks. So you've just it's like when we were talking about, looking at a card and immediately having cards pop to mind for us. Well, for you and me, that's going to be a lot of cards because we know a lot of Magic cards because it's literally our job to think about and look them up. Right. Whereas your average player might not even know most of the cards that came out this year or last year or 5 years ago. But this person, Brody, that's spending more time, is going to know a lot more cards, just be able to build better decks in general. And so I think, how do you find a way within that, even hey, listen, we're giving everybody a restriction, but even within that restriction, I know I'm just going to dominate because they're playing for fun.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it in the shower.
Right. Yeah, it's totally different.
That's a different thing. I'm thinking about it on my drive to work, and I think anytime you're in a play group for any type of game, some version of this will happen because there's no way you're with 4 other people or more, and every single person is exactly at the same amount of how much they think about and are excited about games, or even wired in such a way. Because we all know that there are people that are sort of more wired to sort of become obsessed about things. Like, I have a buddy, I think I've talked about this on the show before. He's one of my best friends, and I like to say I'm not good at moderation, and he's really good at moderation. And so if we both start reading a book, I will stay up till 5. If we both love it the same amount, I'll stay up till 5 in the morning, 2 nights in a row and just finish it in 2 days.
Yeah.
It'll take him 4 weeks to finish the same book. It's not a thing where he's right or I'm wrong. He'll love it just as much as me and be excited to talk about it. He'll be like, we can only talk up to chapter 5 because that's as far as I am. And he's just is bad at obsession and good at moderation. In some ways, he's a lot better at life than I am because it's not great to be,
I feel that.
Yeah.
He can do bedtimes?
Yeah, exactly.
Congratulations.
Guess what? He's
Mr. Bedtime.
He's fresh and his brain is working really well the next day where mine is not, right? Yeah, I finished the book earlier, but yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's really hard to, this is a thing you have to navigate sort of in life and in games a lot. And I think I would say there's a couple of ways. One is just place another restriction on yourself is kind of an easy way.
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell anybody about that restriction, but you can just say, I'm only going to give myself 1 hour to build this deck and see what happens. I'm only going to build it from the cards that I have around me right now, like Rachel was saying.
Yeah.
Those are ways to kind of limit yourself. You could also, it kind of harkens back to something we said before, play their decks. Then you're not, at least from a deck building standpoint, coming in with any sort of advantage. Plus, if you do that, hey, I'd like to play one of your decks if that's okay. They know you're not coming in with the deck building advantage, and you'll probably still just play better than they will because, again, you're more invested in the game. But that doesn't feel as bad to them because it's wow, they're not. The reason they're beating me can't be the cards anymore. Yeah, and that can feel a little bit better.
Yeah, and I mean, you still have to get comfortable with the idea that it's you're gonna get targeted, and you're gonna because you're playing better, and your board looks better, and they're
actually right to do it.
They're right.
Yeah,
they're right. And it's something that's been really frustrating for me recently, where it's just I feel like I can't sit down at any play group and just have a regular game anymore because it's your job. We're gonna kill you, and you're I don't want to get killed. I'm doing nothing, and they're yeah, it's you though. Yeah. And they're right because I'll figure it out. Yep. If you give me enough time, I'll figure it out.
Yep.
And so it can be very frustrating, but sort of recognizing that you're they're kind of right. And you have to embrace that you're still playing and they still like you. And any frustration that they're expressing for you winning or you attacking you is not coming. It's at you. It's frustration at the game of Magic. And just generally, it's frustrating to lose all the time. So you can do your best and restrict your decks and try and build in a way because they're still your friends and you want to hang out with them in a way that's fun for them. But to some extent, that's the role you are in the group. So it's okay.
It's a balance too.
Okay,
I think you can build, for a long time, the same thing happened to me, especially since it took me a while in our content to kind of like calibrate. And I won too many games early and people would call me on it and sort of still do.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself in a similar position to you're at. And one of the ways I sort of started to evolve was I just built a bunch of group HUD decks and they weren't even trying to win. And I knew going in I wasn't going to win. And I sat down and it was kind of like the EDH thing where I'm like, I'm just going to do wacky things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm literally, if I have the chance to win, I will not take it. I'm going to do that for a while until people kind of settle down and realize like, and then I'll pick my spots and try and win games once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still not, I can't do that all the time. And eventually it kind of allowed water to find its level and I didn't have to worry as much within, our Playgroup, which is fairly large, about that part of it anymore where people are like, I don't know. Sometimes Josh cares, sometimes he doesn't. I don't know if this is going to be one of those games, but it doesn't feel like I have to target him every single time.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I talked about with Buddy was an alternate fun con in your decks and have a goal that isn't winning, where it's like, this is my 7 dwarfs deck. My goal is to control 7 dwarfs. And it's like, if I do that, then I feel like I have won.
Yeah.
And so you play in the direction of achieving an alternate fun con, whatever it is for your deck. I want to control 80 food tokens. And whatever that means, it doesn't mean the game is over. It just means I did the thing.
Right.
But your goal is not to kill everybody at the table. Your goal is to achieve a separate thing, which is cool. You still get the itch of playing well.
Yeah. All right, we've tackled a bunch of questions. We have a bunch more to go, including the possible potential debate regarding what we think is the best color in Commander. I'm really curious to see if we agree.
The most powerful.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but we are going to take a quick break and hear a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Welcome, travelers. I'm Kellen, Planar Trailblazer, main character of Magic the Gathering, here to help you kick off the new year. Around this time, people make all sorts of resolutions, but whatever you aim for, you can make it easier with RAYCON. Look, I'm no stranger to personal change, and my RAYCON everyday earbuds have been with me through it all. Their top-tier audio quality was perfect for blasting tunes as a daring scout, listening to true crime podcasts as an ace detective, or coordinating with my fellow outlaws as a devious rogue. And RAYCON's latest model is better than ever. These earbuds come with active noise cancellation, multi-point connectivity to pair with 2 devices at once, and come in cool new colors, like my favorite, vibrant orange. But even with all that, they still start at just half the price of other premium brands. I mean, hey, with these RAYCONs, who knows what new types we can gain this year? We could go to the gym and become warriors, get into some monk-like meditation, or just try to be better humans who call family a little more often. That one's for you, Oko. Dad, please call me.
Get 15% off site-wide at buyraycon.com/command. That's 15% off at buyraycon.com/command. Again, buyraycon.com/command.
And our new merch selection is live.
That is a good feeling. Man, Jimmy, remember how long we just had no merch at all?
Oh yeah, I mean for years if we even wanted to sell a t-shirt, I'd have to enter every order and address in manually, and who's got that kind of time?
Seriously, we would not have had time to do the podcast, much less game nights.
But now we've got Command Zone shirts, hats, wall scrolls, and even our own custom sleeves, all thanks to Shopify.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. They give you everything you need to get your product in the hands of your fans no matter where you are as a business.
Whether you're a fledgling YouTube channel or a global brand like Allbirds, Shopify is there with the best converting checkout system on the planet, turning more browsers into buyers while leaving you free to focus on your product.
Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify.
Exactly. Okay, I'm gonna buy a t-shirt.
Jimmy, you're a host. You could just have a shirt.
Yeah, but I like getting packages. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/TCZ, all lowercase.
Go to shopify.com/TCZ to upgrade your selling today. Again, shopify.com/TCZ.
Sorry, I just discovered that I've been paying for 2 Netflix accounts. I'm Kian, and I may be and have a corrupted memory. But with all the services and subscriptions these days, how can anyone remember it all? Thankfully, I have Rocket Money to ease my burden. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It's hard enough
of keeping track of whether my power is odd or even. I can't be constantly checking all my accounts. But Rocket Money's dashboard lets me see all of my subscriptions in one place, so I know exactly where my money keeps disappearing to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. They even alert me if a bill increases in price, or if an unexplained charge appears out of nowhere.
Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/command zone today. That's rocketmoney.com/command zone. Again, rocketmoney.com/command zone.
All right, my new deck list is complete. Now, let's see which cards I don't already own and buy them.
Wait, how'd you do that without going through a million boxes?
Oh, I just use ARCHIDEKT. They make it super easy to upload and manage your collection. Then, when you're done brewing a deck, you can sort it by collection status to see what you already have.
So this group is just cards you don't own?
Yep, I just click buy this stack, and it takes me right to Card Kingdom.
Whoa.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/command zone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/command zone.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are reaching into the mailbag today and pulling out some questions from patrons. We're going to continue on with a question from Jamie S. Are there any cards you own that have sentimental value to you? What makes them special? This is a fun question because we've talked a lot about our favorite cards.
Yeah, I mean,
like mechanically.
Right. Yeah, so I did an episode recently with two of my really old friends who I first learned to play Magic with, one of the guys that taught me back in the 90s. It's episode 642, and we talk a lot about sort of old nostalgic cards, and the ones that I sort of have still around from that era are special to me. I talk about something called the wave deck, where you can sort of see based on the physical way the cards are curved, because we used to not have sleeves.
Yeah.
And so I can tell the cards from that deck. Actually, I can tell without looking at the side of them just because they're sort of scuffed around the edges in a certain way, because we literally used to play on the sidewalk. So there are certain dual lands. There's a Wheel of Fortune. There's a Demonic Tutor. There's a few things that are still around in my commander decks. There's a Soul Ring from those days, and those have sentimental value to me. In fact, I think I've talked about this on the show. Because we started playing with Posty and Cassius, and then DJ from Jungle Commander really likes like blinged out stuff. So Jimmy started making blinged out decks, and I don't care about bling. I've talked about this on the show before, but I felt like, I felt something.
I have some bling.
Yeah.
I have some bling.
Yeah.
I could bling.
I'll be honest, it was really Post Malone when he came in and he joined the bling club, and I was like, I want to be cool, and I want Posty to think I'm cool, so I need a bling deck of some kind. But I didn't want to go out and like spend all the money buying masterpiece versions of everything. Right. So what I did is I had the proxy guy make me like silver bordered versions of cards that were never silver bordered, or masterpiece versions of Thought Vessel and things like that never existed. So I have this deck. But in that deck, the only thing that was not done by the proxy guy are my original cards from the wave deck that are in there. So my dual lands and the Wheel of Fortune and the Demonic and some of that stuff. And there's a few cards from the wave deck that couldn't go in that deck and are other things. And so those are like white bordered, old, mostly revised cards just sticking out among there. But I'm like, those are cards I love from my childhood. So those are not getting changed. They are what they are.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway,
I love that.
How about you? Would you have any like favorite, cards you own for sentimental reasons?
I mean, I have like I like altars is my bling. I have like some of my oldest commanders are all painted altars. So I've got like Sidisi Brood Tyrant is altered, and Rakdos Lord of Riots, and I have a Feldgriff altar that was given to me for being a member of the CAG. That was done by Greg Soblin and his family, facilitated that, which was really cool. The like holiday cards that you get for being a creator are always very precious to me. So I've got like a binder, like a little 4-square binder of cards that I like are given to me or that don't have a spot in decks yet, but I just like to have all in one place. And that's really cool. Like ALK Alters made me a set of altars from Commander Sphere. We did an episode where we did reskins of Magic cards as Sesame Street characters. So we're like, what card would be like Elmo or whatever? And he made like Elmo with all the cards on him in the Sesame Street border that he made up, which is really, really cool.
That's cool.
So I've got some of those in a binder, which I really like. So
I think that's one of the cool things about Magic is, you can sort of flip through your binder and see cards, and they'll take you back to sort of certain moments, like that you remember opening them or remember playing them in a certain situation, or like, there's cards. I was just flipping the other day, and I came upon a card which is Temur Sabertooth, and it just took me back to like GPLA like 2014 or something, like the one GP that Jimmy and I played standard in.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like that's powerful, right? That the game can just transport you to those spots, and those tend to be the cards that you kind of like stick out in your mind as like sentimental and nostalgic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of really cool ones.
Yep. All right, this is a big one.
This is a big one.
So it's from Treeborn Frog. Do you think the format is ever going to slow down again, i.e. game speed, card power, etc.? What can we as players do about slowing games back down, making them more interesting outside of a Rule Zero conversation?
This is tough. I think the first part of this question is, do you think the format will ever slow down again?
Do you think it'll ever slow down again?
And no, I don't think so. I think it's impossible to.
So the way I frame this question is, let's say you had a magic wand and you could do anything.
Yeah.
But you could do, you know, maybe even a couple of things.
Sure.
What would you do to slow it down?
There's too many factors that are speeding up the format, and if
you can't
eliminate all the 2-mana rocks, is like it's not going to do it.
So by banning things, maybe you could
maybe
a little. If you how would you even do that? Like Magic Wand could just remove all 2-mana rocks from existence,
and all the 2-mana ramp spells or whatever,
and all the 2-mana ramp spells, and also cause R&D to never design any more.
Yeah,
beyond
we're
that.
We're done with those.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that would that would slow the format down a hair, but now
and for now,
yeah, and for now, because the other element that's speeding up the format isn't just ramp; it's that cards are now scaled for multiplayer. In the past, multiplayer was always playing with cards that are balanced for 1v120 life formats.
Standard, yeah.
So they were smaller scale cards. They were like, I'm going to kill you with a 4/4. And now cards say each opponent. Cards say destroy 3 things, not just one thing.
Yeah.
So all of the now, like, you know, you can take, we used to play, what's the 4-mana one that you could kill 2 things with? That's the white instant. That like if you do it on your turn, return to dust. We used to play Return to Dust.
That was a long time ago.
And it's
you
like
can't play it anymore. No.
And nobody plays Return to Dust anymore because there's so many. There's like blow up all the enchantments.
It was probably a top 10 whites common.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now it's like
you never see it,
you don't see it because there's so much. There's a 3-mana one that is sorcery speed that blows up 3 things.
Yeah, it got pushed out basically.
And that's not because of ramp. That's just general card design has like accepted that Commander is the primary way that this game is played, and we need to design cards accordingly, and that just makes Commander more powerful.
Yeah, and power creep is always going to happen because just the fact that a card comes out, and they have to do this, right? Because otherwise, if a card comes out and it causes you to replace a card in your deck with it, you think that card made your deck more powerful for the most part. There are other reasons to change, but let's just say like 80% of those changes fall into that category.
Yeah.
Every time that happens, some amount of power creep has happened.
Yeah.
And they have to have power creep happen because
otherwise why get new cards?
Yeah, you would never buy or get new cards. And there's been actually a few sets in Magic's history that were so underpowered that they didn't have cards that people wanted to put anywhere. And those are huge failures. And, you know, some of those they can go all the way back to like Fallen Empires and stuff where some of those are like borderline. The company maybe didn't almost make it through that. So, and I think it is just R&D's job, and they do a great job of like continuing to keep people excited about the game. And the way you do that is you come out with cards they want to play with, right? And sometimes they aim too high and we get, you know, bust stuff. But when they aim too low, it's even worse because we get bored.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather have a few busted things come out, but we're still excited and the game's so fun than like the game just seems bored and stale because nothing ever comes out that we want to play with. So, but my Magic Wand question was like, hey, if it's hard to fix with a Magic Wand, it's probably not really fixable because Magic Wands obviously don't exist. So I think I totally agree with you. I don't think the format can ever slow down unless a lot of bannings occurred, but it's only going to reset the line. The conveyor belt's still going to keep moving because there's just no other way for it to go. And I think we're feeling it more now because more cards come out now. But I think the real solve, quote unquote, for this, if it needs to be solved, is new format variations or rule changes, right? So like you can think of things pretty simple, like let's say we just said, you know, Commander 2.0 is just going to have 200 card decks. That's just going to reset the floor.
Mm-hmm.
The conveyor belt will continue to move, and we'll probably be having this conversation again in 10 years, but it gives us 10 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say we're going to create a format, and they tried to do this with Brawl. I mean, that's literally kind of, well, it wasn't the main thing. They wanted to sell new cards.
Yeah.
And then they learned Commander players buy new cards. We don't have to have a format for
so
it.
it's fine.
But let's say we created a format and it said, hey, this format is exactly the same rules of Commander, except also you can only play with cards that were ever standard legal. It would change. It would be hard. You know, you'd have to create a whole website to figure out what those cards even are. But like, it would lower the card pool and disallow a bunch of the Commander product stuff and probably like say everything's less powerful for a while.
Yeah.
But the conveyor belt's still going to move.
I mean, eventually, like, one of my favorite building projects this year was building the Lord of the Rings pod.
Yeah.
And building all of those decks. And that power level is restricted by the cards they printed in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And I set the rule that nobody has Orcish Bowmasters and nobody has the One Ring because they're insane.
Yeah.
But it's like, I built an environment that is slower and is cool and restricted naturally by, you know, in this case, flavor, but it's some sort of boundary that you set. And those games feel like old school Commander games.
A little bit, yeah.
Because they have fewer rocks and they have fewer like staple type stuff. And you're playing slightly worse removal. And you just have
you're
to...
not on turn 6 being like somebody's going to win next turn.
No.
That happens much later, yeah.
Yeah, because the cards just aren't that good anymore. So I think if you slow things down, you have to put some kind of restriction on it. But the thing is in Commander is you're only putting the restriction on yourself, basically. Unless you have a playgroup where you're like, we're all going to build only Lord of the Rings decks. Or we're all going to build only Marvel decks or whatever.
I think you could do it if you said we're all going to build 200 card decks.
Yeah.
You know? Listen,
And
there's
let's
problems
see.
with that. It's
Yeah.
hard to shuffle and everything else.
Yeah.
But like, if everybody agreed to do that, that'd be the type of restriction that could slow it down for your playgroup. But the problem is, if you go outside that playgroup, what are you doing with your 200 card deck? Like, you know, I guess you could just cut it in half and play with half of it.
do your best, yeah.
It'd still be legal, technically.
Pauper
But,
Commander and like Artisan are gaining
Yeah.
some amount of traction. So you could foster an environment at your game store where it's like, I really want to play Artisan. Is there anybody who wants to build Artisan decks with me? And that's I think it's only commons, and you can have uncommon in the command zone, I believe is the rule. And those are significantly slower.
Well, and if you think about Modern and then Pioneer, the whole reason those exist are because that's really the only way to slow back down to like, quote unquote, a reasonable amount, right? Modern is kind of created as an alternate to Legacy as like a sort of slower version that can allow different cards and kind of get us back to, or them back to wherever they think it needs to be. And then Modern got so big that it sped up to the point where it's like, okay, well, we need another one. And here comes Pioneer as like the alternative to that. And you know what's going to happen? There's going to have to be an alternative to Pioneer at a certain point, because once the card pool gets to whatever the card amount is, 10,000 cards or whatever it is, it starts to get to the point where like, okay, turn 2 wins are probable, not just possible or whatever. And that really isn't where most people like to play. So in order to slow it down, the really only answer they have is sort of format rule changes. And I think there could come a point where Commander sort of has to evolve, and an alternate version of Commander kind of takes the number one spot. And whether that's, you know, whatever rule changes have to occur. I think, you know, ideally it's minimal. Like the difference between Modern and Legacy as far as rules is pretty small, as far as like, it's just like you're only allowed to use these cards instead of this amount, you have, you know, half of that amount.
Yeah. I mean, Commander's the exception to the rule, right? We get all the cards. All of them. Nobody gets all the cards.
Yeah.
Like vintage.
To me, though, that is one of the biggest draws and something that we can't rule out of Commander naturally, because that's what makes it the casual format is you got Magic cards,
you can play
them. Yeah. And that part can't change. That's why I think the suggestion of playing with 200 card decks or something like that is more viable than saying, hey, you can only play cards from Khans of Tarkir on or something.
Right, because it starts to be a higher lift for like bandwidth lift.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a really tricky problem. It's something that you can talk to your playgroup about. You can limit power level, but as time goes on, as there's more cards, it just speeds up.
Yep.
We're going to continue on with a question from Hannah E. We got this one in an email. I'm attending my first MagicCon in Chicago. I wanted to know if you have any recommendations on what to bring or plan. First con.
First of all, we'll see you there.
Yeah.
We should say Game Nights Live is going to be at Chicago and all the MagicCons this year. And something different is happening for Chicago, which is we are going to be in a sort of side theater that's not in the main convention hall. And the show's going to actually occur a little later, so not during the actual convention. There'll probably be still some of like tournament events that are not finished up, which is good because I think it'll allow more people to come see it because it won't interrupt like a draft or something you're in the middle of. But anyway, sorry, going back to Hannah's question.
Yes.
What are your, suggestions for the best way to prepare for your first event?
You're going to need fewer decks than you think.
That's a good one.
Is the first place to start.
Everybody their first con brings 12.
I brought 9. I had a full backpack.
Yeah.
Full.
And a very sore shoulder.
Oh my gosh. I played like 4 of them, maybe. You need, I would say, max 6.
Yeah.
Max.
Yeah.
Like
you can get away with 4 easily.
Easily. I bring 4 commander decks and a Canlander deck these days is like pretty normal. And I usually play maybe 3 of the commander decks and the Canlander deck. And that's just sort of enough. You will more value space in your bag, an empty deck box, sleeves, like draft sleeves. Having those things take up space in your bag. First of all, they are lighter and they prepare for all of the stuff you're going to get.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're going to get stuff and you're going to want to get stuff and you're going to want to put that stuff somewhere. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but every pound and every square inch of space in your bag adds up an accumulation of punishment over the whole weekend. It's pretty big. So every little bit of space you can save and not bring with you, it's valuable. You'll want it.
Yeah. Real shoes. They're concrete floors. I wore Converse to the first one, and my feet paid the price.
Yeah, you do a lot of standing on concrete. It's tough.
It's tough, especially if you want to do artist signatures or something. If you just want to sit and play, it's a little less important, but it's a lot of walking on concrete. So I would bring like actual sneakers with padding.
I don't think people understand. The convention halls are huge.
Huge, yeah.
Just walking across them takes quite a while. And if you're like wandering looking at vendors and waiting for your draft to fire, trying to get a picture with something or whatever, there's just going to be a lot of standing, even if you plan on mostly playing.
Yeah. So real shoes and bring a water bottle just to have on the floor. It gets really dry in there. There's a lot of bodies. It's nice to, like Chicago a little less so. It's going to be winter, but like when it's in Vegas or when it's in a really dry place, having chapstick and a water bottle will save your life.
Yeah, I would say water bottle is great. I would say also like some little snacks are good to have.
Yeah.
Food around convention halls is tough for a bunch of reasons. It's not always the greatest, but also it just is inconvenient and hard to get to. There's lines. It tends to be very expensive just because they got you, right? Like if you're at the convention hall and do you want to walk a mile and a half out and back in? So you can save yourself a lot by just having some snacks on you. Just to be able to push meal times to where it's convenient. It also helps because like if you're in the middle of an event or a draft or a commander game, you don't always know when those are going to end, when they start kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found it really helpful to just have a water bottle or some Gatorade or something and like a couple of little individually packed, like even just goldfish crackers and some beef jerky.
Yeah,
like
granola bars, something.
Yeah, exactly. Cliff bars or something like that.
Really helpful.
Yeah.
Finally for me anyway, if you're going to sign up for events, which I think you should, they're awesome.
Do it early.
Do it early.
Do it now.
And do one a day.
Yeah. People a lot of times think they're going to want to do like 3. It's insane.
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
You're going to play less than you think. It's not necessary for most people. You're not going to play 20 commander games over the weekend. That's why we say you don't need as many decks as you think. I think people think there's a lot more time than it is, but think about it. A commander game takes like an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you play 2, that's 3 hours of your day, right? Then you do like a draft. You look at the vendors. That's most of your day. You see a panel or maybe Game Nights Live. There's not as much as you think. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be LobbyCon, people hanging out in other places. You're going to stay out later than you think. You're going to get to the convention hall later than you think. Like you can do sort of less in a day than you think. And so I know a lot of people who sign up for a lot of events and end up just collecting the packs and not playing in them or coming up and picking up the packs later because they didn't make it to it. Right. And then they just spewed, the money out basically. Yeah. Yeah. Just be reasonable. Here's the thing that won't happen. You won't be sitting there with like, boy, I've got nothing to do. No. I didn't book up this time and I found nothing to do with the time. You will find stuff to do at the time because you'll meet people and they'll be doing a thing and they'll be like, you want a cube draft? And you'll be like, yeah, actually, because I didn't book myself for 4 drafts today. Yeah. Yeah.
It's I find it just makes everything a lot less stressful and a lot more fun. So
I try and plan almost nothing because you will find stuff to do. It's not hard. Yeah.
But we're excited. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, you're going to have a blast. Come find us and say hi for sure and come see Game Nights Live for sure.
Yeah.
All right, next question is from
This is from a couple different people had a similar question.
Okay, so Eric and Mike on Patreon both had a question that was similar to this.
Yes.
Any recommendations for finding a new playgroup? How do you find people to make a pod with?
Yeah.
This is another question I think we get fairly often, which is like, how do I find other Magic players to play with?
Yeah. It's tricky. The obvious answer is your game store. If you have one in your area, then you're lucky and good. You should go. I think Commander is at its best when you find a pod, when you find a play group like this. And it is an uncomfortable answer, but the answer is you go to your game store and you date players there and you try and find people that play similar to you or play cool decks or you like hanging out with. And then you ask them for their number and you hang out with them outside of the game store.
Yeah, I think the comparison to dating is pretty apt. I think you could also like look for online groups in your area. Facebook or other things will often have like
Reddit,
online groups. And Magic players are usually looking for other players. So you do a little bit of research online. You might be able to obviously be safe about all that stuff, but you might be able to find gatherings of other groups. We get this question a decent amount, and I always like to sort of tell this parable or story, which is like, I come from a really small town in Oregon. And I mean, when I was growing up, it was less than 10,000 people in this town, so very small. And that's the type of place where you just sort of know everybody in town, like every family, every whatever, like you know most people. And so when I moved to Los Angeles, I was like, I'm going to know so many people because there's so many more people there, right? And what I learned is like when you live in a place that's highly densely populated, you actually know less people than you did in a small town, even though there's just a lot more people around you, because the reason you know everybody in your small town is you see the same people all the time. And in some place like LA, you don't. You see different people all the time. So you just don't become familiar and you just don't strike up random conversations because you don't see Susie at the grocery store every time you go to the grocery store.
Sure.
And so you have to change your mindset to like, hey, making friends or acquainting myself with people has to be an objective that I'm trying to accomplish. And so you join hiking groups or you join a basketball league or you're a homebody and you don't normally do this, but they invite you out to hang out with people at work. You go and do it because, as human beings, we want friendship and gathering in our lives. And one of the things you have to sort of do is like grit your teeth a little, even if you're an introvert, and push outside your comfort zone and go to the local game store, even though it's a little intimidating. And just be like, if I want to find Magic players, well, the most likely place where they're going to be, I should go to that place. And I have to be willing for some uncomfortableness and maybe some, maybe some awkward interactions. But that's an investment I'm willing to make because I really just need to find a couple and that'll start the ball rolling to like form a little group or get involved in a group that already exists. But yeah, you have to sort of, you got to pull your pants up a little bit, I think, and put yourself out there.
The other thing I would say that really helped me was that this really weird story where I was playing Magic with a group of comedians in Denver. It was like 3 or 4 of us. And we were playing, and I remember we were in the green room at a show, and I was like talking to one of them in hushed tones in the back. I was like, we're going to play tonight. We're going to do this thing. And one of the other comedians, like a friend, came up and was like, are you guys talking about Magic? And we were like, yeah. And we found out that like 6 or 7 of our other friends were playing Magic on Monday nights and had no idea we played because we were so quiet about it.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I was just like, I'm just going to talk about it. I'm an adult. Nobody's going to stuff me in a locker. I'm just going to like wear a Magic shirt or I'm going to have a Magic pin on my backpack.
Yep.
And I'm going to create the opportunity for somebody to ask me about this thing.
I love that. It's great.
And it's like, it turned into this amazing play group where there was like 12 of us that met every Monday. And we were all friends already. There was a couple of extra people. And like we always had new pods and it was perfect. And it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't just like overheard us like whispering about it at a show.
Well, I mean, I literally met Jimmy because he put some Magic cards down on a desk. I did not know him. I just knew him as Freddie's brother. And I was working at Rocket Jump on their marketing for Video Game High School Season 3. And I looked over and he put some Magic cards down on like a desk. And I said, you play Magic? And he's like, yeah, we're playing tonight. And it was Craig and Alex Kessler and Jimmy.
Oh my God.
So if he hadn't put that down and I hadn't said that, this whole podcast maybe doesn't exist. Like, who the hell knows?
Yeah, but just set up a flare.
That was me overhearing a conversation, basically, right?
Yes.
Like, so I think I love that advice. Wear the shirt, put a pen up, yeah. And
even if it's just like the little magic fork, nobody's going to know what that is if they don't know what it is.
Yeah, but somebody goes, "Hey, I like your shirt," and you're like, "Oh, you play?"
Yeah.
And that right there, you
Done.
maybe just eventually have a company with 20 people that's all they do is talk about this game.
Careful. It's a powerful pin you wear.
All right.
Speaking of,
Yeah.
the next question comes from Matthew S. on Patreon. What are some of the things to think about when starting an actual play channel for MTG? What are some things you wish you would have known when you started? And what are some of the mistakes you would warn others about?
I'd say the same thing every time we get asked a question about starting making content. Just go make it.
Right now.
Just don't worry about any of the answers to any of the questions you just asked. I will still answer them at the end of this because I'm not a jerk, but they shouldn't matter to you. And nothing anyone can say or anything you can read or any research you can do it's all going to pale in comparison to what you will learn by just trying to do it the first couple of times. After you've done it a couple of times or tried, now I think you're in a position where you are better able to even understand or to digest the advice someone might give you. But I'm going to give you some advice. It won't matter anything to you right now because you haven't done it. You will learn so much more just by like pointing a camera and just trying it. And just who cares how it turns out?
You have all the tools you need to start making it right now. Like you have a phone, you have duct tape.
That's all you need. That's it. You're done.
That's it. And the audio is going to be crap and the video is going to be crap.
But
and
who
it doesn't
cares?
matter. It exists. And you're going to learn like how to record it and how to light it. And you're like, well, this doesn't work, so we're going to try something new.
Yep.
Because what works for this channel is not necessarily what's going to work for your channel or your group of people.
Yeah, there's just no substitute, especially early on, for just getting in there and getting your hands dirty. Just do it. Just make it. Don't worry about the outcome. And here's another parable that people who have listened to our channel for 5 years have probably heard. If you were going to go become a professional golfer, you would go and hit golf balls at the driving range every day and just play on the course every day. And you wouldn't be involved in any sort of tournament or anything or thinking like, hey, if I get a hole-in-one in this one hole, I'm now a professional golfer. That's not how it works, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. That's what people sort of think about content. Like, oh, man, I want to do all this research and make it perfect right out of the gate and make my first video is going to get 20 million views. And like, that's not going to happen to you. It doesn't happen to anybody. Don't even think in that manner. You are just trying to get better at making content because maybe your 50th video will get 20 million views. That's very rare also and would be like winning the lottery, but at least it's possible. It's impossible that your first video is going to go nuts. So don't worry about your first video or your second or your 10th or your 20th. Just worry about getting better at it. And the best way to get better at it is just do it. Okay, so what were the specific questions that were asked here? What are some things you wish you would have known when you started? I think I knew going in that my advice is just do it. So I think when I started in the film business, which is kind of closer to probably where you're at, because I had already been doing things for 15 years when we started this channel. I wish somebody would have told me the golf analogy and been like, Josh, stop being so precious. Like I tried to make a short film, which I did eventually make, but we spent like 4 or 5 years doing it, like trying to raise all the money, get the trucks up, because we had the mentality of like, we're going to make this film, it's going to get into Sundance, and then somebody's going to, the studio's going to knock on our door and say like, can I give you $50 million to make, a movie? And that's just not really how it works. I wish I would have just said screw it and made a lot of little things and who cares, and learned everything, learned as much as possible and tried to get better at filmmaking rather than thinking like the next thing I make has to be the calling card that gets me the big job. That's the first thing I would say. And then what are some of the mistakes you would warn others about? You got any mistakes you would warn them about?
I don't know. I feel like the mistakes are kind of part of it. And as long as the mistake isn't big enough to like pull it all apart, which is a really big, crazy mistake, that's probably a life mistake.
Yeah.
Is like you make mistakes and they're not that dire. Like if you release a video that has a problem in it, you're like, whoops, the new one, I will look for that next time. So I don't think
mistakes are the point.
Yeah, it's all sort of part of the growth process. I think something that people don't think about when they're getting into actual play stuff is they think very much about like the cameras and how we're going to post it on YouTube and we need a logo and we need a name and we need all this stuff. And my advice from like I got in from a completely different place than Josh did, but is start as a member of the community. Get on Twitter, get on Reddit, have a name that is consistent, join Patreons, and become a name and an icon that people recognize. Because Magic's a really small world. And if you are a voice that people recognize and then you start a channel, it's way more likely to get support from other people in the community than it is to just be like a stranger that posted on YouTube. So like the way that our podcast, the way the Commander Sphere got as big as it did so fast, and it didn't get huge, but it got bigger than a lot of Magic podcasts, was because I was already a member of the Twitter community and I was actively posting as myself and was interacting with Jim LePage and Sheldon, and had I was a recognizable voice in the community before I even made content. And then when I was like, hey, my buddy Dan and I are doing a funny podcast, those people watched it. And then they were like, this is pretty fun. I'm going to repost it. And that helped us more than anything. And our audio was crap, but we were funny. And we had people that wanted to support what we were doing. And that mattered way more in the beginning than anything that we did technically. So I guess that's my advice. That's a little different.
Yeah, I would revise that because just to say, do them both at the same time.
Oh yeah, do them both. You should start.
Don't be because I think here's what happens with most people. They want to start content, or they have this idea to start content, and they put all these barricades in front of themselves and making the content, and then they just don't ever get to the part where they even make anything.
No, I agree, yeah.
90% of the people that have asked this question over the years, and we've gotten asked this literally hundreds of times, never made a single video.
Yeah.
And they'd be way better served to just make a video and see what happens from there than to be well, okay, then I'm going to participate in the community for a while before I make the video. I think participating in the community is really good advice, and you should do it, and will help you. But don't use it as an excuse to be and until I have this standing in the community, I will not make the video, because it will. Yeah. People say weird things. They're like, is it too late to start doing YouTube?
What? No.
What does that mean? Because you didn't start at what you perceive to be the easiest time, that you should just never do it? Is it too late to get fit? Is it too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a crazy way to think about things, but people do think about things in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this not the right, until I have the perfect idea, should I even do it? Listen, you're not.
Your ideas will get better, I promise.
Yeah.
The first one ain't the best.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, you'll never have the perfect idea, but if you did, I guarantee it'll be more likely to come if you've done a million things than if you've done zero. So. Yeah.
This next question is kind of related. It's from Zach G on Patreon. It says, all of you speak so eloquently for such long periods of time.
I'm glad we have you fooled.
It also feels like you don't do a lot of takes. How much training did you go through to get like this, or is this just something you all do naturally?
Rachel, do you want to talk about your training? Because we definitely both have
we do
training
have
and practice.
Yeah, and it was before any Magic content, but in high school I did theater and I was in choir, and then in college I started doing improv and doing stand-up, so I did a lot of comedy, and I was writing sketches. I did a little bit of acting, not very long. And then I moved to Los Angeles to do stand-up.
And you did before you even got here, too.
Yeah, I did. I did stand-up for a year in LA before I moved here. I'd been doing it 10 years at that point. And then the pandemic happened, and I started making a podcast because I didn't want to do stand-up on the internet.
So let's recap that.
Yeah.
We're talking about maybe 20-ish years.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Of training and practice.
Yeah. Of various stage performance skills. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I'm similar. I did theater and things growing up in high school, and then I was a theater major in college, so the improv background. And I think improv, one of the most important things for people that are doing podcasts and the type of content that we do. And then I wasn't a performer for about 15 years there, where I was behind the camera and I was doing editorial. I was doing movie trailers for those who don't know, but I was involved in filmmaking, studio, movie stuff, and still very much involved in storytelling and performance and things like that, trying to make my own films and become a director at that time. So I've been around performance and performing basically, since I was 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah.
My dad ran the local access cable channel in our little town, so I was around cameras and stuff at that time. And I also had a little stint as a local news correspondent or news reporter. So a lot of training and a lot of practice performing. So I think this is an important thing, and I think it could go back to the last question. This is a thing I tell all kinds of content creators all the time, is that performance is a skill. Anybody can develop it. It is a skill like almost any other skill. Like anybody can learn to shoot free throws pretty good too if they just do it. A lot. If you just shoot 1,000 a day and have a coach there, you can't just do it yourself, right? Have somebody there giving you feedback, and you making adjustments. You can become good, at almost anything. Will you be LeBron at the end of the day? No, because you can't make yourself 6'9". But I can try. Yeah, but you could probably become very good at it to the point where you're in the top, 5% in the world at it. Almost anybody could do that. And I think performing, we tend to think of like some sort of struck by lightning natural talent type of deal. And there is talent involved, but I believe any single person on this planet, just about with practice, could become a professional performer of some kind, right? So it's not some natural talent that we've got. We've got a lot of performance background. And if you look at YouTube, I am always amazed by, not amazed, but I find it fascinating that the background of so many popular content creators, their background is in one of two things: acting or performing of some way, stand up, whatever, or teaching. And if you think about teaching, it's a performance profession. You are in front of a group. Performing, yes, it's educational, but you are presenting information in a clear and concise manner. You are telling a story, or, you need your audience to respond to you. Prof, our number one content creator in Magic. Former teacher, yeah. Current teacher. Yep. A lot of successful YouTubers, when you sort of delve into their background, it's amazing how many have some sort of teaching in their background.
A lot of stand-ups come from teaching as well.
Yep.
They also come from like preachers.
Lawyers make up a decent chunk as well because, they have to speak eloquently. And so they have, like, it's funny how, like, you don't think of certain professions as performance. Yeah. And what we found when we do auditions for game nights, we don't ask their profession. We don't even know it when we choose them. But a lot of them happen to have a performance background. Jacob, our very first guy, was in the church choir, was a big, and this is a person who's just used to being in front of people. Like Crim is a musician that was used to being in front of people. Those are people with performance backgrounds. They just know how it is to interact with an audience and pull the emotions out, and even if it's not speaking. So, yeah, I guess to answer the question, and I'm glad you think we're eloquent. Yeah.
I would also, it is an important point to make that we're edited.
Yeah.
Like, this is all off the cuff. This is not scripted, but like, they cut out ums and ahs, and like, if we say something weird, we'll cut it and say it better, clearer. Like, well, we have... This is not live, so we get to fix as many mistakes as we catch.
Yeah. The podcast, we tend to fix fairly few.
Minimally, yeah.
Yeah, not very many. Game Nights is highly edited. Yeah, that is like literally like say the joke, and then we'll be like, hold on, I can say that better. Say it again. Maybe the emphasis should be on this part. Say it a third time. That's, again, it's not scripted exactly, but we do sort of work on bits in the moment and say, that'd be funny if you said this and then I said that. Okay, let's say that.
Yeah.
So that is a different kind of performing, but still performs. But I want to say to anybody who's... wants, who thinks I could never do that. That's not true. You could do it. You absolutely could. And anybody out there that's a content creator that doesn't have a performance background, that doesn't have a lot of practice and training, you should get that training. It's not that hard. You can get online improv classes. You should absolutely do it because it will improve your content by a huge degree in a way that's unnoticeable to you, but very noticeable to your audience.
Yeah. Up next, speaking of live... A question from Wyla S. Can you share the planning of Game Nights Live? I would love another behind the scenes or even a mini documentary of all that goes into it. It's my favorite part of the conventions by far.
Well, that's great to hear, Wyla. We're glad you enjoy it. We have a lot of fun doing it.
It's so fun.
I like the mini documentary idea. We did a featurette about the making of Game Nights so long ago that we should probably do another one at some point.
It's like totally different. Yeah. It's in a totally different place.
Yeah, it's a totally different, like so much more complex than it used to be.
Yeah.
But we could do one for Game Nights Live. I think that'd be fun. So thanks for putting that idea in our head. It's probably too big to talk about the entirety of it. Do you have any points about it that you want to?
I mean, we can highlight some of the basics where we build all the decks in-house and we do a lot of practicing and balancing against each other. And that's why the games are so fun because we've practiced the games. And we don't like script the games in any way, but we want to make sure that each of the decks have like sort of an interesting role in the game and that they're all relatively balanced in power level. And we've learned a lot about like what makes a good and interesting, engaging Game Nights Live deck. So I think a lot of the prep goes into that. And then of course the like writing the trivia questions and making the flags and deciding on the teams. And once you decide on the teams, okay, what are the commanders? So there's a lot that goes into sort of the prep for the theme of it. But with live is very different than game nights. With game nights, we can all build the deck separately and sit down and play them for the most part. There's some balancing aspect to it. But when you can't edit and it's happening live, so much more happens on the pre-end just to make sure that we're prepared for anything that could happen in a crazy game of Commander.
Yeah, for game nights, the recorded version, you have a lot, most of your work is after you've recorded. So
Right.
you play the game and then 90% of the work happens in the next 6 weeks where it's being put together by VFX and editing. And you can fix a lot of things. So if the game was kind of boring, you can still inject, some amount of thrill or suspense by just having the interview of the player be like, well, I don't know what they got. What do they got? Where you can't really do that in a live setting. So the game has to carry a little bit more. So what we learned is that 90% of work actually happens before. Obviously, because no work can happen after the live show because it's done.
It's done.
Yeah,
You've
that's it. Yeah, so Rachel and Jamie build most of the decks, and then what happens is they get played in pods here by 4 of our team members, and then when we can, we'll play it with the actual pod that's going to play it. But sometimes the guests are from out of town, and that's hard to sort of do. We do a couple of days of prep in, say in Chicago or whatever beforehand, where the guests will play through a few games. Again, we're just trying to make sure that everybody in the pod has a general understanding of what the other decks are trying to do, what the key cards might be so that they can play well when they're playing. They know their decks, obviously, because the decks get built, but they all get sent, all 4 of them, to everybody, even if they're not on site, so they can goldfish them online and check everything out. And we really stress to the guests, hey, this is not like recorded gameplay. We need your time commitment to be before this to test out your deck, look at everybody's decks, have a good idea. But And I'd say hasn't been any Game Nights Lives where we didn't make changes along the way of this process. So usually decks are built, we put them together, we play them, and then, we learn some stuff, make some changes to the decks, play them some more, learn some stuff, make some changes to the decks a couple of times before we sort of figure out, okay, now they all feel not just balance, because balance is really important and probably the number one thing, but also they feel like they're doing things that are interesting that allow us to have the kind of game that will play well in front of a live audience. Yeah, and we do things in Game Nights Live like call people on stage or poll the audience. Well, you need cards that put you in situations that allow you to call people on stage or have decision points. So, if there's a fact or fiction type of effect on a card, we like that because it's here's a choice that can be made by an audience member. Let's put those cards in the decks. But you don't want too many of them, so it's that delicate balance.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of prep. It's a lot of learning. I mean, even at the most recent one, we were playing and we realized nobody at the pod had a Bajuka Bog in their deck. And we were like, Josh has a graveyard deck. How do we not put Bajuka Bog in any of the decks?
Yep.
And we were like, we need Bajuka Bogs, and put out a call to staff members and was like, who's got a Bajuka Bog we can borrow for the game? Because it got missed in deck building. So it's still a process.
Yeah, I think I'm really proud of where we've got to with it and all the lessons we've learned to sort of get where we are. Because they're not things that occur to you the first time you do it. In fact, I think our very first show, it's funny, we could probably point out 5-10 things that we assumed were correct based on the recorded version of the show that were not. It's a live thing, so there's a lot of differences and a lot of assumptions we made that were not right. But, our ability to change and evolve has really made the show what it is. All right, next question, related to Game Nights, but the recorded version of it. What Game Nights episode are you most proud of, or do you feel the most proud of, from Davis M? Well, Rachel, do you have a Game Nights episode that you're most proud of?
I mean, I have less to do with the actual making of Game Nights. I get to build a cool deck and show up and try and be entertaining, and that's fun. So I have less pride in Game Nights other than that was sweet. I got to do a cool thing. I really liked my the deck I played in All Will Be One. I thought that deck was sweet. I think if I take pride in a Game Nights is in Game Nights Live stuff, because I have a lot more to do with the pre-production of all of that. When a game is cool and you get to see the 4 decks work together, it's really exciting. It's a really cool thing to have all the decks get to down to the wire, and this deck had that, and this in the most recent one there's some really great moments. So I'm very proud of it.
I think too a lot more rides on the performers, and the commentators and the players on a Game Nights Live than it does in the recorded version, where the performance matter, but a lot the bulk of what matters is on the heads of the directors and the editors.
Right. Yeah.
Because they can craft it and move stuff in a way that once the performance is done, you spend 8 hours, one day doing it, and then they spend, multiple hundreds of hours over the next few weeks putting it together. Yeah. Whereas it's like Game Nights Live is, if you come up with a good bit in the moment and do it, that was all you. That wouldn't have happened without you. Nobody else could do it, right? So it's really fun to have those moments where you like say a funny joke and everybody laughs. That I mean, those are gold. If you can just do that 5 times throughout, and everybody did that, that'd be 20 times the whole audience laughed throughout the couple of hours, which is gold. Yeah, or you just come up with this is going to be cool, and you stand up and do a thing. Like, so I agree. Game Nights Live, is, from a pride perspective, is because I'm in a similar position these days. Like Murph, Jake, Manson, Sam, Evan, Eric, those people have a lot more to do with Game Nights recorded episodes these days than me or Jimmy do, to be honest. Like, but if I had to name one I'm the most proud of, it would be the Lord of the Rings episode.
Oh, that's such a cool one.
That was the one where we scaled up the entire set to make us all look like hobbits. I think this was Jake's idea.
It's so smart.
Originally. First of all, the idea is great. As soon as he said it, we're like, and then your brain starts going, how could we do it?
We could do that.
Hilarious, yeah. That forced perspective, and everybody knows Peter Jackson kind of did that for the Lord of the Rings movies and everything. And then it was like, okay, so we need the way you do this is you make everything else larger so that we look smaller. So we need an extra large table, we need an extra large chair. And then we're like, crap, the whole background has to be larger. And we were like, could we project it back there and just scale it up the projection? And we were like, maybe. Luckily, we'd been playing with some rear screen projection stuff. And then we got Jacob and Xolo to be in it, who are like, great guests to get, obviously, but like cool dudes who we're friends with and we play Magic with quite a bit. And I just love those guys. And it just it seemed like everything came together for that. And it was Lord of the Rings, so it was
awesome. Yeah,
one of the most exciting sets maybe that's come out, ever for Magic. Probably the most successful set ever. So just like the convergence of like everything, just kind of and a lot of it's luck coming together. I think Lord of the Rings is, if I had to name one.
That's a great answer. Yeah. That's a cool one.
Okay, time for the big question.
Let's do it.
The big debate, maybe. We don't know.
Let's do it.
I think my answer is known. So it's really like what you think. More interesting. It is from Emmanuel T. And they said, I have heard on another podcast, how dare you listen to them? No, I'm just kidding. I've heard on another podcast that the best colors in the format at this point are green and white. What is your take on that? How would you rate each monocolor at this point in time?
So these are sort of different questions in my head. Is like, how would you rank each monocolor, and how would you rank the colors in terms of power in Commander? Because I think there's like certain cards or colors offer really powerful things, but not necessarily all the things. Like green is an incredible monocolor and is a very powerful color in Commander overall, but I wouldn't say it's like it does the most powerful things in Commander strictly.
Well, and it's always powerful is always hard because it's like, is it at its average power level or is it when it's at its most powerful?
I would also argue that it depends on, depending on what power level you're playing, different colors are more powerful. Like the closer you are to CEDH, the more powerful like blue becomes in my head. But if you go further down like toward casual, blue becomes a little less and green becomes much more powerful.
Absolutely.
So it depends on what the goal is, which is a wishy-washy answer, but we're going to actually talk about it.
Yeah, because everybody loves the it depends answer.
It depends.
But you're right.
I'm your mom.
Those are all good. Those are all good points. But the question still remains: what do you think is the most powerful color in Commander?
I think strictly in terms of like when you put it in your deck becomes better. I think it's still green for me. Like at the average power level that we play at, I think green just improves a deck. It offers more stable ramp. It offers really powerful top end. Its removal is less good, but who cares? And it even has like pretty solid board protection. It's the most diverse color where it's like when it's in a deck, it's often the bulk of the deck, and I think there's a reason for that.
To no one's surprise, I'm going to say blue, and my evidence is just that in the most powerful version of this format, blue is dominant.
Yes.
And the blue shell. And when I say that, what I mean is any commander. If it has blue in it, you could make a shell that's just 100 cards and is only blue. And it could be, it could be viable as far as it could win some games in a CDH pod if you just have the blue shell. Now, it probably won't, you need your commander to matter for it to do very well, but that blue shell is just very powerful because blue has the answer to everything. Blue's the only color that has free counter spells and that has combo, and its removal, which is supposed to be bad because its bounce, is actually fine in Commander because with 4 players, bounce is so powerful.
Tempo is important, yeah.
Yeah, and it has the card draw, and it even has the tutors and stuff, so it just covers every base, and it has alt win conditions that are hard to stop. Thassa's Oracle obviously is a big reason why this is, and I don't think that's where we play at.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my case for blue.
But in terms of just like, if you sat down at a table with a blue deck, you're in good shape for the most part. You're kind of ready for anything. Even if you've got just like, if you have a stack of clones and a stack that's like 20 clones and 20 counterspells, that deck's going to be pretty good at most tables.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just like that's a modest way to do it. So I would have green at number 2. I agree with all the things that you said. So I think the next inevitable...
I think I would have blue at number 2.
The follow-up is, how would you rate each monocolored at this point? So we have the same 1 and 2, but just switch the positions. So the interesting part of this question comes like, okay, but where do you have 3, 4, and 5? Like, how do you rank the rest of the colors?
I think my answer changes if we're just talking about like building a mono white deck. Like blue does have trouble like just closing out a game in Commander. It can delay a game, it can control a game, but in terms of just like finishing a game, that I think blue really struggles. And I think black, if we're building like, if the question is if you're building a monocolor deck, I think black is better than blue in that moment. I would go mono green and then mono black because black has control, it has tutors, and it has finishers. And card draw. And most of those are very difficult to interact with, and most of them are like, if you make enough mana, which black is really good at, you can win the game with an Exsanguinate or a Tormented Palefire or some combination of cards that you've tutored up with Demonic Tutor or Vampiric Tutor, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree that black, because of tutors and combo, it kind of takes the spot and could be 1 or 2 also just because of combo. Yeah, I think blue has better ability to stop combo, which was why I would put it above black. Yeah. Because if you pull off a combo against black, it's really hard for them to stop. Yeah. Whereas blue's like, nope, your combo just doesn't happen. Sorry. Yeah. And the fact that blue can do that causes you to play in such a way that people can mess that up too. Yeah, but I agree. Black would be my 3rd position. Yeah. And we're weighing all factors here. I'm not saying in EDH or whatever. It's just like in Commander, if I had to make a statement. We're
doing an average. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Including casual and everything. Where would I put it? I would put black at number 3.
And then easy white for me in 4th.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. And I think 6 years ago, I would probably not. I would probably have had it in 5th. But I think white is moved up substantially now.
It has card draw, it has board protection, it has interaction, it's even flexible, like white has flash and recursion, and like it has this ability when you're playing against it, is just like it just won't die. It won't die. And I can remove all this stuff and just like I have to kill that twice and then bog you and then it's done. And you're like
maybe.
That's a lot to ask. So I think white's come up a long way and has a lot of the pieces that it needs to be super, super successful now. I think the catch-up ramp has gotten to a point where like using untappers to untap like big lands has been really injected into like how I play white and how I've seen a lot of people be successful with white. So, and I think red has not had the help that white has had. It just doesn't have the board presence or protection to really do it yet. And I think there's powerful red commanders. Like you can point to Krenko and Perforos, but if you're looking at the average red commander, it's very difficult to set up a situation where you can win the game, Mana Geyser and copy it a few times and cast a big burn spell, or stack a bunch of things into Goblin Bombardment, and that's sort of the 2 big red.
Underworld Breach,
yeah. But you need like Lion's Eye Diamond or something like that.
Put that on the level of like anybody's powerful cards. But I think that's what it ultimately comes down to is if
just
you look at
enough.
Red's top 5 cards, Jessica's Wills, Mana Geysers, whatever, the most 5 powerful, Dockside No More. Yeah,
Underworld Breach.
And you look at everybody else's, it's probably like they're about. But 6 through 10, there's a huge gap, and everybody else has better 6 through 10 and way better, 11 through 25. It's just like you start looking at Red's, 15th best card, and it's horrible. It wouldn't make the top 100 in blue. Like, it's just bad. Yeah, you're way past Tybalt Trickery and stuff like that now, and you're into, like, you're past Perforos.
Yeah.
You're into, like, Young Pyromancer, and it's like, that's...
And you're like, there's no way. That's a common in white and in green.
It doesn't hold a candle to what, the 20th best card in the other colors.
If you think about, like, Young Pyromancer next to Springheart Nantuko, and you just want to scream, like, it's infuriating.
Yeah, so this is a drum maybe we should beat for a while, and hopefully, they can start helping Red out a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say, I think the gap between 1 through 4 is relatively small. I think that, like, it's all fine. It's within the margin of error. I think those are all small, and I think Red is a little bit outside of that. Whereas, like, we both think white is the 4th most powerful color, and whether it's green or blue in number 1, I still think the difference between that is smaller than the difference between white and red. I think that gap is bigger.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It really does depend on the power level. That I think that totally changes the math on it. Like, the only consideration for me at the top is just like, okay, what are you trying? Like, what power level are you trying to live at? If you're in CDH, you go mono. Like, blue is way more powerful. If you're doing your average table, I think, like, if you're doing high power casual, I think black is pretty close because you have the tutors and you have the speed.
Yeah, and green's right in there too.
And green can fight on that level because they have all the like mana creatures and that kind of stuff. The acceleration is there. So those three feel very tight for me.
There might be a small gap between the top 3, white and red.
Yeah.
I just feel red's pretty far behind at this point, and white has gained a lot of ground and is, like, in the mix. But probably you're right. I think it's probably the top 3 are pretty close together. A little bit of a gap, and then there's white, and then a larger gap, and there's red.
Yeah. And I think white's good. Like, we've gotten some very powerful tools, and it's been very cool.
For the most part, everything's fine, and even red is fine, and you see it played, and I'm not, like, hesitant to play red. It's so bad, but red feels like it has to be a more supportive role than a main role most of the time. Again, there are exceptions, Perforos and Krenko in some certain scenarios, but in general, I find that I have red in a decent amount of decks, but it's very rarely the main part of the deck. It's a supporter in the deck. Where all the other ones, I think I have decks where they are the main player and they're being supported by other things. Yeah. And white used to be more like that for me, where it was more a support color. And now I have decks where it's like, nope, this deck is mostly white, and the green and the blue are here to help it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what I think is cool about how they changed white's power level is they brought in a thing that is still powerful in Commander that is white's thing, and like the board protection that white offers is the most powerful thing that white does, in my opinion.
And it's really good.
It's really good. The combination of good board wipes with board protection is a new element that they've sort of introduced to Commander that white's like, no, I'm the best at it, and it will end this game. Whether it's Teferi's protection or just like even giving your board, phasing your board out, or giving it hexproof and indestructible, that kind of thing.
I do think they also did add a lot of card draw over the last like 5 years, and that's a backup to the protection because it's a second form of protection,
right? Yeah.
Which is like it used to be.
Even if my board gets wiped, it
used to be one board white's done. Like because everybody else has full grips and they got 2 cards because they couldn't draw anything. And now it's like often, even if they don't have the protection, they repopulate like everybody else because they were able to draw enough cards. Yeah.
Cool. So those are the answers. Kind of wishy-washy off the top there, at the top there, but
Green. You still came down. You said green, blue, black, white, red.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
We were the exact same list except for blue and black.
Blue and green. Yeah.
Or blue and green. Yeah. Turns out Simic is pretty good. Although I wonder if this is true. We didn't. Maybe we'll do another stats episode at some point. But when we did our stats episode years ago, green black was the most popular by a decent margin. And
Graveyard stuff's fun.
And I think the winningest.
That makes sense to me.
Well, it's funny that like the group mind would find the winningest. It would become the most popular.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I thought it would be Simic. But Simic was neither the winningest nor the most popular. It was up there, but yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we'll have to do another stats episode soon. Hopefully that was helpful. And thanks for all of the questions, everybody.
You can send us questions at any time.
Yeah.
We haven't done a mailbag episode in a while, and I think it's a thing we want to get back to doing once in a while. We don't want to do it too often, but we do sort of bank them for later when we get good ones. So if you've got any burning questions that you wish we would answer or address, email, Twitter, comments, Patreon, Discord. There's a million ways to get a hold of us.
To the listeners. questions.
Send us them.
Put them in the comments below. We'll try and answer like as many as we can when this comes out. I like to scour the comments when they come in. We try and make sure that on the first couple of days that a video comes out, we're in the comments answering questions. So if you have them, get them there, or maybe we'll save them for a later episode.
I mean, you can answer it in the comments, but then also like put it aside to answer in the content because, you know, not everybody reads the comments. Yeah, exactly.
Sense.
So if you want to see your question and your name show up on the show, that's a good way to do it.
If you want to pick up any Magic cards, the reason for the season, go to cardkingdom.com/command. Have a pile on your desk. You could start a channel.
Have a pile on your desk.
Yeah, that's how you met
Because
Jimmy.
you do? Yeah,
no,
got it.
is what I just buy some random ones from Card Kingdom, put them on your desk, and who knows, it could change your life.
That's actually not a bad idea.
Card Kingdom has a huge selection of singles and sealed product. If you've got some extra cash after the holidays, if you're like, oh, I finally don't have to buy any more presents, spend some on yourself, and you can do so while supporting the show. They have so many cards, and it's really awesome that you can get to go to one place where they can get all of the different conditions and versions and cards that you're looking for. They can package it safely and professionally and get it shipped to you in one package. We really appreciate the professionalism that Card Kingdom has. We buy a lot of cards for shows where we need to get all of the cards together in one place, and Card Kingdom makes that easy. So support the show and pick up some cool new cards over at cardkingdom.com/command.
Yeah, and then another professional place that could help protect your cards is ULTRAPRO. ULTRAPRO.com/command is the best place to go to get your Magic accessories. If you want to make your battlefield look awesome, then ULTRAPRO has all kinds of products because they have the deal with Wizards to have a lot of the IP from the different sets on there. So you can often find like your commander on a playmat, on deck boxes, on sleeves. Also, the Mana 8 line is beautiful. It's very classy, very high quality materials. I love everything about it. And
MagicCon's right around the corner. They're perfect to get signed or drawn on by artists.
Yeah, they're
if you're coming
really
to
great.
Chicago, they're perfect.
Yeah, as people who sign a lot of things, I love when somebody gives me something and I'm like, my Sharpie's going to look really good on this.
It's going to look great.
Yeah, it's
and I'm
really,
not worried.
It makes me nervous when they hand me something. I'm like, I don't know where the Sharpie's going to show up good on this because it's this cool piece of art, but you know, there's not a light spot on it.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to sign it, but it might just look kind of smudgy if I'm not careful. So Mana 8's perfect for that stuff. So again, ultrapro.com/command.
Do we have time
For an end step?
I don't know.
Do you have an end step?
I don't know.
I have one.
Yeah, hit us.
Okay, so there's a game that a bunch of people in the office have been playing lately that's a lot of fun, and it's called Once Upon a Galaxy.
Oh.
And it's like it's one of those auto battlers, kind of like Hearthstone Battlegrounds or Teamfight Tactics or something like that, where you it's a little bit of a draft. You pick different cards and then they auto battle against thing and you find the synergies and whatever. And it's super fun, and you can find it. It's an app that you can download, and it's free to play. And by free to play, I mean, like, I'm not sure how you even spend money on it. I'm like a little bit worried about the game developers because I'm like, how
have you monetized this?
How is this going to continue? Because it's a fun game, but like if no one's getting paid to make it, I don't know how you all people got they got to make a living and play their rent and their car insurance, and there's literally I was like I don't even know how to spend money on this. So yeah, man, I played like 40 hours of it. So
well, cool.
Yeah, so Once Upon a Galaxy,
easy to get into.
Yeah, easy to get into. Totally fun to play, and if you're into Magic, like you'll totally get it because it's just like a card game and card synergies and stuff.
Sweet. All right. Before we go, we're going to say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Rachel Kendra, Karina Cruz, Sebastian Salazar, Gaurav Galati, Jamie Block, Jordan Pridgeon, Jake Boss, Eric Lem, Josh Murphy, Manson Lung, Christopher Matista, Evan Limburger, Sam Waldo, and of course, Jimmy Wong. Thanks for listening, everybody. Happy New Year. Hopefully we'll see you at Chicago, and
if not, we'll see you on the next episode of the Command Zone podcast.
Bye.
Peace.